Traditionally, Kansas state revenues have been based on a three-legged stool concept, with taxes coming from three sources: an income tax, sales tax, and property tax. This last legislative session, the income tax leg was shortened when income taxes were eliminated on certain corporate or business non-wage income. Lisa, starting with you, do you agree with this restructuring of source of revenue in Kansas? Why or why not? And how do you think this will impact Johnson County?
I absolutely do not agree with the new tax law. I think that there are a number of problems with it. For one thing, we learned after it was passed that it's so poorly written that parts of it cannot even be implemented. So it's very clear that the legislature is going to have to go back and take it up again, which may be a blessing to all of us, because the issues need to be addressed. They have given these incentives, as Paula was mentioning in her introduction to the question, to businesses, but there is absolutely no tie to expectations or requirements that the businesses do anything in Kansas to stimulate the economy. They're not required to create jobs. They're not required to increase existing worker wages. So there's absolutely no guarantee that these incentives are going to do anything to stimulate the economy, which is one of the primary reasons that this was proposed. And then over the course of the coming 5 fiscal years, assuming that conditions remain relatively the same, and the Governor Brownback and his team will say, oh, but we're going to have all this great explosion in Kansas. Well, if things remain relatively stable, which is probably more likely than the miracle that they're talking about, we are looking at a $2.5 billion budget deficit, which will mean either we have to put the weight on the other two legs of the stool, probably property taxes, which is not good for anyone, or we will have to make drastic cuts to public education and services for Kansas, and we just can't have that. And so we need to address the new tax law and put something in place that's responsible, fair, and that works.
Merlin, the same question. Do you agree with the restructuring of sources of revenue in Kansas? Why or why not, and how might that impact Johnson County?
I also disagree with the new tax policy. I believe that the income tax is the fairest tax, what we call progressive tax. You pay according to your ability to pay, and if you lose your job, you don't pay at all. However, the mortgage keeps on coming. You have to pay your property tax, you have to pay your sales tax regardless. So the burden of the taxes falls unfairly on middle and lower income persons. Furthermore, the idea that low taxes will create jobs within Kansas has been proved to be false. I believe we tried this during the Graves administration. Also, the Institute for Taxes and Economic Policy has done a study which shows that, well, they compared economic performance of states without income tax as opposed to states that have income taxes, and actually the states with income taxes have performed equal or better on 3 measures of economic performance than the no income tax states. So this is what we call junk economics, the idea that we can lower taxes and have a better economic condition. Thank you.
And Mr. Delaney, same question.
So you're likely to hear 4 different critiques of the tax law. I also don't agree with it for 2 reasons. The first is that it will cause the state to rely more heavily on property taxes as a part of the same package of tax cuts that led to the reduction in the income tax. A portion of the sales tax was also to be phased out at the end of the year. And so if the state is going to maintain the same level of expenditures on such things as school and various other programs that are funded out of the general fund, it will have to be made up of property taxes. And Kansas is already in the top 10 in the country in the level of property taxes that we pay. It's not a leg of the stool that ought to be lengthened, it's one that ought to be shortened. So that's the reason why I disagree with the idea of cutting income taxes as a way to, as a part of the strategy to fund government. But the second is because it's fundamentally unfair the way in which it was done. I'm a lawyer. Our firm is organized as a limited liability partnership as one of the pass-through entities that's now relieved of all income tax. The partners in my firm, myself included, will pay no Kansas income tax next year. Our secretaries, our associate lawyers, the people that staff our file rooms, they will pay tax. And that just seems fundamentally unfair to me.
Thank you. And Mr. Russell?
It may come as a surprise to you all, but I also disagree with the new income tax law. The question calls it a restructuring. What it really is an elimination of revenue, and that was the goal. The governor and his team had a choice. They could have funded the schools. They could have eliminated that waiting list. Instead, they chose to pass and sign this gigantic elimination of the income tax. It is unfair for the reasons that Mike outlined. We have created a system where the bosses do not pay income tax and the employees do. Not to mention, we have created a huge hole in the state budget. The governor says this tax plan is going to create 24,000 or 25,000 new jobs in Kansas. I'm not an economist. I don't know whether that's right or not, but let's assume it's right. If this new tax plan creates 24,000 jobs, I think those jobs would have to make about $1 million a year in W-2 income, in order for the tax cut to pay for itself. Not going to happen. Another way to look at it is that if we had jobs, if it did create jobs at the average Kansas wage of about $50,000 a year, you'd have to create about 550,000 new jobs at that wage for the tax cut to pay for itself. We only have about 100,000 unemployed in Kansas, so that's not going to happen either. Just because the governor says it doesn't make it true.
Thank you.